Hi, and welcome to the Backyard Road Trips podcast. I'm Zack.
I'm Jim.
And we have Connor Gaudet with us today. Oh, that rhymes too. Look at
Hey.
that. So, Connor,
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you. It's funny when my wife and I started dating, she got my voicemail and I say, "Hello, this is Connor Gaudet," and she thought I was saying, "This is Connor. Good day." Good day to you.
And Connor is the curator here at the Mattapoisett Museum. We're on location, Jim. Isn't that exciting?
Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. This is great.
We're going to talk a little bit about the museum, a little about your career in museums and your interests outside of museums too.
Sure.
And go from there.
Sure.
So here we are at the museum.
Yeah.
And we were able to get a great tour of it. Got to see, lots of the artifacts, and so cool the kind of the breadth of things that are here. And for a visitor, what do you recommend on their visit?
Well, so you're going to go through the church building, which has our summer exhibits. Right now, it's still up from last year. It's 2023's Mattapoisett Then and Now. That was my first exhibit here. I had just started here at the museum. So it's just a fun kind of photographic retrospective of how iconic Mattapoisett scenes looked 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, and how they look today. So you can kind of take a trip down memory lane if you remember the 50s or 60s. And for newbies, it's just a nice little history lesson. You go through there. We have shipbuilding in our Mendel galleries, because Mattapoisett was a really big shipbuilding town back in the day during the whaling heyday. And then through there into our carriage house, which is just chock full of stuff. Amazing stuff like agricultural equipment. Upstairs we have replicas of rooms in the house, kitchens and that sort of thing, historic artifacts that people from town donated. So yeah, you can expect hopefully an interesting time.
And it is. I mean, just the amount of things, I guess there's a better word to say than thing, but that are there. And
Artifacts.
Artifacts, there we go, better than thing. That are there, and how they even were transported there is amazing too, alone.
Yeah, we've got some big stuff. The wagons, the street sprinkler, the enormous ice hauling sledge. I think I didn't show you this, but we also have one of the town's earlier fire engines. It's also from 1821.
That's so cool.
Oh, it is. That's cool. Actually, in Plymouth, where I live, my garage was the first firehouse, if you will. The old pumper was in there on
Very cool.
On Franklin Street. If you
Franklin, where's Franklin?
Watson Hill, the town green.
Yep.
So those.
Where the big eagle thing is?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Okay,
So
I
right
lived
up
at.
there.
I was at 79 Court Street. I lived right next to the museum.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. And the courthouse museum actually has that pumper that was in our.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to take it back. That's my life's mission. So that's it.
You just have to start a really big fire, right?
yeah. There we go. Perfect.
Was there a original mast that was down there too that was hanging?
Yeah.
Or is that,
Yep.
That's really cool.
So that is part of the mast of the Wanderer, which was the last whale ship to be built here in Mattapoisett back in 1878. We love all things Wanderer here, and I think that might have been a part of the flagpole in Shipyard Park. The mast from the Wanderer was made into the flagpole in Shipyard Park around 1925, just a year after the Wanderer crashed, and it was there for many, many decades. It got struck by lightning at least twice that I know of.
Wow.
But they kept on putting it back. But eventually it was time to say goodbye. So they made a replica that looks like a mast for the flagpole now and said, "Hey, do you want a giant piece of the mast?" And so, of course, we said, "Sure, hang it in the carriage house."
Absolutely, right?
Now, speaking of the Wanderer, can you tell listeners just a little bit about what the Wanderer is in general?
Yeah, the Wanderer.
Or was.
Yeah, it was. Well,
Yeah.
it still hangs in the air around Mattapoisett,
Right,
you know?
right.
That's one of the things that I kind of think is funny that, we supposedly lost the Wanderer when it crashed 100 years ago, but it's the one thing that really hasn't changed in Mattapoisett much is the presence of the Wanderer in the last 100 years. It's just, it was, there were stores named after it. The elementary school yearbook starting, I think, in 1927 was named the Wanderer. So really shortly after,
funny.
and we still, our local Tri-Town pub is the Wanderer.
That's right. So all these commercial businesses, named after it.
It's an
named after the boat.
institution.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It
That's
is.
right.
But before it crashed, it was the last whaling vessel that was built in Mattapoisett, a town that was known for building whaling vessels. And it was also the last whale ship to sail out of New Bedford. So it was really it was built 20 years after the peak of the whaling industry, and it just, outlasted all the other ones.
Right.
When we were on the tour, you told us how like Mattapoisett was like the Rolls Royce of like whaling.
Mhm.
That's something I didn't even know. That's really
Right.
neat.
And I knew definitely about New Bedford and the whaling industry, of course, but it made sense that these other coastal towns had the shipbuilding here.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I like to think about this guy in 1924 still going out, he just won't kick the habit. And it's like, dude, we've been able to get this out of the ground for like 80 years.
Right.
Stop whaling.
Right.
So yeah, it made many a journey between 1878 and 1924. It took a break from whaling for a while, sailing out of San Francisco to supply the Klondike Gold Rush with supplies, but then came back eastward and spent the last, I guess, 15 or 20 years sailing out of New Bedford again. And it was also featured in an early silent film, Down to the Sea in Ships.
Oh wow.
Which I couldn't tell you the plot of,
Right.
but there were some whaling scenes that were shot on that, and I think the Charles W. Morgan's in there too.
Oh really? Okay. Now you're celebrating the Wanderer
We are.
for this next
Yeah.
fiscal year. Is that what you call it?
Sure. Well,
July.
we start our fiscal in January, but
Okay,
for the
okay.
summer, so in July we're changing over our summer exhibit. Basically, the last summer we didn't get it open until August, I think 29th, because I had just started in the role, and it took me a while. So we're giving people the chance to come back in the early summer if they missed it last year,
Right.
and also give us some time to get the Wanderer stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this summer the exhibit will be Wanderer 100, the afterlife and legacy of Mattapoisett's last whaler. And instead of going back into the history of the ship and all of its voyages and its oil, we're looking more at the last 100 years since it crashed and kind of interrogate the artifacts and the relics and just think about, why were people going out there and stealing relics of this ship? I just think it's interesting. It's comparable, I think, to, them having to put Plymouth Rock 10 feet below the surface and encase it in iron so that people won't chip it away.
Exactly.
People like to be close to history and, feeling that closeness physically. I guess relics go back to the medieval times with saints. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I won't get too heady with the exhibit, but we will have some fun artifacts. It's just interesting how it's been commemorated. Ashtrays and restaurants and,
Well, I'm gonna jump a question here because it's a good
Yeah,
segue.
sure. Go
So,
for it.
like, what would you consider to be like the most interesting or rare artifact that's like in your possession?
So that's a tough one. Right now, the one that I am most interested in is actually the new model of the Wanderer because it's just so intricate and it took so much craftsmanship and valued by the builder at about $90,000. Hopefully no one will steal it and try to sell it now that I've said that. But yeah, I think that it's raising interest. I was just blown away when I saw it. It's stunning to look at. It's one of those things that you don't have to be into ship models to appreciate the fine work and craftsmanship that went into it. So I'm excited about it, and that's part of why we're doing the Wanderer 100 to celebrate this thing. It's not just a replica of the ship. It's in its own right, really a work of art and fine craftsmanship. So
Sure.
that's my current favorite, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. You were showing us the pictures of like the build. Like he like really documented every single piece of it, and incredibly intricate. It's beautiful.
Yep.
I mean, and so tiny the little. I mean, like the little pieces.
Yeah.
It's
Crazy.
like how I just can't. I can't fathom that.
I know. Like there was some minor damage in transit, and so a person from here in town who also does scratch ship models, he came in to do some repair work, and he's down there working with tweezers and magnifying glasses, and it's just crazy.
So now you came to this museum about a year ago. You said. So first of all, what really stemmed your interest in museums to begin with? I know we were talking a little bit about. I'm going to say upstairs, but we're upstairs here too. And the other room, just a little bit about your educational background, but you can give us maybe a little joint history of yourself as well as.
So I've always been interested in history and storytelling and books, old books. The first book that really grabbed my attention and interest when I was a kid was sitting. My mother owned it. It was an 1830s Bible, and I mean I'm not particularly religious. I wasn't that interested in the text, but someone had pressed in between the pages flowers and poems and correspondence and ribbons and little sampler sewings. And each one of those things in my head was a moment in time, a reason that a person put that there. It was, I was excavating it, like an archaeological excavation of a book. And I continued to love that and do that. So that's sort of my intro into history as a child. In high school, I did a lot of videos for classes, many of which I got in trouble for. But I was also doing creative writing stuff. And so when I went to college, I was like, wait, I can actually go to school for this stuff? Wow. So I double majored in film and electronic arts and creative writing.
Oh, wow.
So, if I didn't make it in the movie business, I still have my writing to fall back on.
Right.
So I moved to New York like everybody else and had to make a living. So I mostly worked in advertising and post-production. And I still do post-production. I've been a video editor for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
I still do freelance work. It's been handy in the museum field because I've been able to, do videos for them. So, and I played music, a lot of music and that sort of thing to keep my creative brain working. I got laid off in 2008 with like 10% of the population, because they weren't thinking about advertising when, people were barely keeping on to their homes or jobs.
Right.
But that ended up to be, a blessing because I was pretty miserable, I was authoring DVDs that were rush orders. You got to get this right away. And then it would sit on a shelf for a week before someone dawdled over and like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. I don't know. I wanted to work in a field that I loved, but also that made a difference, that helped people. Right. And, I'm not an EMT. I'm working in a museum, but I still find it that it's an educational pursuit for some people. I can still help them and appreciate their town history, So I went back to school after a series of jobs, including, managing like a nonprofit rock camp, driving a van for a year, working as an ad salesman for like a trade magazine. Went back to school first for library information science with a concentration in rare books, and then applied. There's a dual degree program. I was going to Long Island University, Palmer School, which was, the classes were all in the library at NYU in Washington Square. And so I learned about NYU was offering a degree. Basically, you apply to a program and you can do like cross credits. So it's like 2 degrees for the price of 1.5. So you're still paying out the nose. But so I applied to and got into the Public History and Archives program at NYU. So I sort of did both degrees at the same time in, I guess, 2.5 or 3 years.
Wow. So you have 2 masters?
I do, yes. Wow. I am a master of both arts and science.
Oh, there we go.
Wow.
Yes, an MLIS and an MA in Public History and Archives.
Wow.
So I worked at NYU in the university archives for a while, did some freelance work, but my first sort of history and museum gig was as the oral history coordinator at the 9/11 Tribute Center.
Oh, wow.
Which became the 9/11 Tribute Museum, which has since closed, actually. So this is not the National Memorial Museum.
Okay.
So this was a museum that was founded in 2005 by a retired firefighter who had lost his son, and not Salvation Army, what was one of the other aid groups that worked as a volunteer on the site during the recovery. And to me, it was and remains one of the finest examples of public history that I have ever, forget about being a part of it, just my knowledge of public history. They started out by doing walking tours. They had offices right over the site when it was basically just a hole in the ground. It was started, I should say, as a project by the September 11th Families Association. So their initial projects and goals when they started was just giving families information about their loved ones and how they can, bring DNA wherever and, what was going on at the site and basically organizing them so that they could have a voice in the process. So they saw people basically making pilgrimages to this construction site and not knowing what they were looking at, not even knowing if they were in the right place. So they started going down there and talking to people and saying, just telling them their story and telling them what they were looking at. And they saw how much that impacted people. These are people that, the thing about September 11th, it's like JFK, it's like Pearl Harbor.
Right.
It's the moment that coalesced and you have a feeling in your stomach when you hear, the date. And that's for people, whether they were in New York or Pennsylvania or Washington or Maine or Arizona or whatever. And so people were coming here trying to understand, trying to connect with this history, sort of the same thing I was talking about, wanting to be close to that history. Right. And this was their I don't know, they were doing that. They were getting that by having Lee Ielpi and Jen come down and share their stories. And so they started training volunteers and setting up an actual, sending out emails and saying, hey, we're doing tours of the area. And so tourists could come and they would learn about the events of September 11th and what is going on in the area at the time. And then they would be, the volunteers would tell their stories about how it impacted them. So the volunteers had to be either family members of victims, they were first responders, they were Lower Manhattan residents that had to evacuate for months and months, or they were recovery workers or volunteers who served in support of the recovery effort. So they had deep personal connections to the event. And that's sort of what people were looking for. They wanted to understand, I guess the human scope. So it brought this incredible global event down to an individual person standing there talking to you, sharing their story about how it impacted them personally. And, people wept and they went home feeling uplifted, actually, because this is a group, a community that grew up out of this thing, and they're sharing their story and then telling people to, go home and do something good, do something nice. It's taking this profoundly horrible event, but sort of doing something with it that might be counterintuitive to some people. It's really trying to do good, trying to uplift. So then they opened kind of a storefront museum across the street. It was on Liberty Street. It used to be a deli. We were there for several years, and then we moved into a larger space and kind of tried to get the story further along, because at that time, this was 2016, I joined as an oral history person in 2015. So, 10 years after they had started, sort of maybe a year after grad school. So the story had evolved over 10 years. People responded to it differently. You were having school groups of kids come in who weren't alive when it happened, little third graders and stuff. So it's an interesting trajectory, but we were also seeing people who had been impacted and were doing good things with it. So we wanted to tell those stories about people who took that horrible thing and did something good with it. So one example, Tuesday's Children was an organization that grew, if you remember, it was on a Tuesday. And it, it took care of kids who lost parents and family members. And those kids started another group, which I can't remember the name of, but it basically brought kids from other countries who were impacted by terrorism or war and had lost family members. So you'd have kids from the West Bank or Gaza coming to the United States and talking to kids from Haiti or Northern Ireland or Israel. There were Israelis and Palestinians sitting down as young people, so that they could then bring that message home with them and try to, do good with it too. Yeah, and even after that, after Sandy Hook, some of the kids from Tuesday's Children, they started another summer camp for the kids who lost siblings or were wounded. And so it was like literally, kids, now adults who had lost someone, mentoring and helping kids who had lost someone. So I get a little teary, choked up talking about it sometimes. Because it really, I'm honored to have been a part of it and to have, conducted interviews and preserved that history, but also in my time there, try to, send a message of hope and encouragement to people to go home feeling like they can do something to change the world too, in their own little pocket of it. So that was my intro to public history.
Wow, yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. It really points out, I think, how meaningful the work is. And it's almost sort of too bad that it's like, the world needs bridges, so we need engineers, and engineers make money.
Mm-hmm.
The world needs that too. Yeah. And we should find money for that.
I remember my father he was drafted in Vietnam, but he didn't go over, but he's something he didn't really, he would talk about stories, but not tremendously. But I remember as a kid going to Washington, D.C. and both seeing the Vietnam Memorial, but also the Smithsonian History Museum of just display that was just seeing him kind of look through that was just a little bit different than, a little different perspective on kind of what that can.
So important. Yeah. And thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I only left when I got married and wanted to be closer to family. So
Mm-hmm.
we moved to Plymouth. I got a job at the Pilgrim Hall Museum. Then 6 months later, COVID.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
To the day.
Wow.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, we closed 6 months to the day of my first day of work. And, it kicked around, did a lot of digital stuff. I'm glad that my background in digital media was able to be helpful because we were able to do digital programming in which I had experience, create digital content in which I had experience. So by the time I was gone, my title, I was still doing curatorial work, but I think my title was digital collections and content manager, something like that, or programs and content manager. So it was good because I was able to, I'm blessed that I wasn't fired, that I wasn't let go because there was still work to be done, and I was able to perform that work. But after a while, it was just time to move on. It was a very small organization. Even before COVID, it was maybe 3 full-time people and a couple part-time people. And there's really not an advancement for internal growth,
Right.
So once I had been there maybe 2.5 years, I started looking and learned that the Mattapoisett Museum in the town that I grew up was looking for a curator. So my wife had just got a new job that would probably support us there with part-time work at the museum, just for your readers or listeners to understand. Yeah. Luckily, within the first couple weeks that I started working here, an archivist position opened up at the Fishing Heritage Center in New Bedford, which was also part-time. So I spend 20 hours a week over there, putting their collections in order, getting them online, and 20 hours a week over here, playing with the fun documents and artifacts and putting together exhibits and writing grants and all sorts of other stuff.
A lot of hats, though.
Yeah.
I do,
definitely.
and I'm still doing freelance video editing work for Pilgrim Hall Museum for their.
Oh, you.
So
okay.
if you go to the exhibit, you'll see some of my handiwork, and my name is on the banner, whatever the printout is.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm working for 3 museums right now.
It's also doing what you love to do.
Yeah.
And so you were in New York up until 2019 then?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I was there for about 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
I went to my undergrad. I went to Bard College in the Hudson.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. I spent my entire adult life in New York, so I feel like this, regressed New Yorker that's in the small town in Mattapoisett where everybody knows me, and it's like
Hanging out at the nest.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I go get drunk at a bar or something, people are gonna hear about it. It's funny. It's just like the separation of work and life in New York and Brooklyn is so different. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I go to my local tavern and they don't care what I do. They're just like, hey, how's it going?
Right.
What's up? What's happening, Connor? How's the wedding stuff going?
Sounds like we have a Lifetime movie in the works, though. Goes so comes
drama,
home
there's
to his,
tears.
yeah,
I
exactly.
already watched this.
Yeah, leaving the big city.
I'm grateful though. During COVID, I came back to the area generally to be close to family.
Right.
I was starting a family of my own. I knew that I couldn't afford to live in New York and continue there. Growing up close to my grandparents was very important to me, and I really appreciate that I had those relationships. So I wanted my kids to have that too.
Right.
So we bounced around. We were in Plymouth. We were in New Bedford for a while, and we just in November bought a house in Rochester.
Oh, wow.
Which is, I don't know, maybe a 12, 15-minute drive here, maybe 9 minutes from my parents. I was glad to be here, during COVID, because, both my parents have pre-existing health conditions, and we were able to go grocery shopping for them and do that sort of stuff. Have dinner in the backyard and different tables.
Yeah, right.
But now also just to have my kids be able to get to know them.
Yeah.
Also, it's weird. You leave a city where you've spent your life, and my entire social and professional network is there. And so I come back to this area, and it's like people haven't seen me since I was 18. But thankfully, my parents aren't assholes, so they're known to be good people. So people say, "Oh yeah, I know your mother. Okay, all right,
You're good.
You're right. Yeah. I know your parents."
But your parents pronounce their name differently than you.
I know.
So
Hence the confusion.
Yeah. He goes away to New York, and he gets rid of the ET sounds in his name.
I know, right? People are gonna, Mr. Fancy Gaudet. All
Right.
Too good for us Mattapoisett folk, huh?
Right, drinking his craft beer and his fancy
just
sneakers.
only Coors for me.
Really? Oh,
Of course, man.
okay.
Yeah, I am. So in New York, I was very poor. Not that I'm not anymore, but the cheapest tall boy you could get was Coors, Coors 24. It was 99 cents.
Coors Light or Banquet?
Oh, Banquet.
Okay.
No, don't give me that crap. Coors Light cost 50 cents more than the Coors, and also it tasted like crap. So
Right.
I am a Banquet man. That's what's in my fridge.
So banquet. Hey, we actually did a
Bad beer.
taste test. Miller Lite won blind.
For the best.
Best,
of the
yeah,
worst.
Huh.
yeah, best of the exactly. It was nice and cold. It was cold.
I was a fan of Schaefer when we first moved there.
Oh yeah.
I think they stopped brewing it maybe a couple years in, but that was like a New York brew. It was pretty cheap. It's funny, you live in different neighborhoods, and you find the cheapest okay one that you could find. I don't know. I don't know if that's why I'm kind of a lager person. You know, it sucks because you go out to these craft places and no one's making craft lager. It's
No.
all IPAs and you know.
Lager takes a lot longer to make.
Does it?
Oh yeah. That's a big
lager.
part of it. Yeah. Even I was, like Cisco from Nantucket. I remember they had like a summer lager and they went so it's kind of like you have your twofold where your ales are more popular and they're a lot easier to make.
So who would you if you could go back in time and drink with any drink?
You know, that's a difficult question. There are so many interesting people. Christ. No, not literally.
He'll give you the free stuff though.
Yeah, you got wine, you know,
that's
just-
right.
I don't know. I was thinking about it. So many people are so interesting.
Well,
you know.
that's gonna be a group. You can have a
All right.
with you.
I don't know that they all get along. Well, I guess it'd be interesting to be, to drink with Churchill and Roosevelt. Just pick their brains on stuff. I don't know. All of my favorite historical personages, I don't know, Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin. I don't know if he was much of a tippler. He went to bed pretty early, early to bed, early to rise. When I thought about it, it's a silly answer. He's not really from history, but I'd love to have a drink with my grandfather.
Right. Oh yeah.
Either of them, because I mean, they didn't. I guess I probably have, but not for 10 or 20 years. I guess depending on which one.
Yeah.
But just to shoot the shit and because they passed before I met my wife, before I had kids.
Would it be coarse?
So I'm also a vodka drinker. So my maternal grandmother, he didn't patent anything, but he would drink what he termed a see-through, and that's vodka rocks with a twist of lemon.
Okay.
And so I've adopted that drink.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. And then my paternal grandfather, he was a Seagram 7 man. So he would do a Seagram 7 on ice. So I'd have what they're having.
Right.
All right. Well, you're born and raised in Mattapoisett, back in Mattapoisett. Give us the background road trip.
I go to Buttonwood Zoo a lot.
All right. Yeah,
with the kids.
My son was just there on a field trip the other day.
Fun. I also go to the antique marts in New Bedford. That's where I hang out. It's funny even we'd go there before we had kids, but it's a nice place to push the stroller around as long as they don't get too crazy. I haven't gone out to the Sippacan Historical Society yet. I like the fine folks at the Rochester Historical Society. We're lending them some objects for their summer exhibit. I like to go there. We go camping a lot. Let me think. Pinewood.
In Plymouth.
Yeah.
Plymouth? Yeah.
I'm trying to think if that's Fernwood's out in Western Mass. Yeah, so we go to Pinewood a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I like exploring in Miles Standish, the state park.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I went to camp there. I was a Boy Scout, so
Oh yeah.
went to Cashalot. So we do camping stuff. So we would go to, when we lived in Plymouth, we would go to all of those open air spaces, which are fantastic. Now I've got woods in the back of my house, so I can walk
There you
around
go.
there. Yeah, so we nerd around pretty locally. There's a great children's museum in Fall River,
heard
right
about
before
that,
the
yeah.
Braga Bridge. Yeah, it's really cool. It's in an old courthouse that they redid.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of fun.
The Sippacan, there's a Sippacan River, right? Is that, So I thought that'd be a great name for either a package store or a brewery. Yeah, Sippacan of beer or Sippacan.
That would be,
so.
Sippacan. That was the original name of the village when it was part of Rochester. And they named it after a Civil War general? No, because they separated in early 52. I think it was a Southern general that was famous for a battle in the War of 1812, I think.
Oh wow.
So weird. It's not even a local.
No.
So that was 1852, I think. But Sippacan, it's another Wampanoag term.
Right.
I don't know what it means, unfortunately. Oh, Sippacan! I just got that.
Yeah.
He's very quick. With
Oh yeah.
You answered another burning question they had.
Oh yeah. I love little local historical society museums because you can talk to the people they're there because they love it. They're usually retirees who are volunteering, doing whatever, and they have cool stuff that's out and you can touch. I'm a hands-on guy, and I like to. The funny story is that when I was a kid, my parents took me to Paul Revere's house in Boston, and I hopped over the velvet rope and sat in his chair because and she was like, "What are you doing? Get out of there! Why did you do that?" I'm like, because I wanted to sit in the same share that Paul Revere said.
Right, of
you
course.
know? So I'm not a velvet rope kind of guy, but yeah, as I said earlier, I'm not telling third graders they can touch anymore. After they picked up all the axes and the forge hammers and played Warhammer and they're jumping on the forge and oh my God. So not a velvet rope kind of guy, but yeah, I'm not inviting it on myself.
You must be this tall to touch the hammers. One of those signs there.
I always go with an eye for what is good interactive, methods. We're kind of limited by our means, but yeah, I like to make it a meaningful experience for a visitor. I've tried to take that ethos from the 9/11 Tribute Museum to want to leave people feeling happy. I mean, I don't think I can necessarily uplift someone, with agricultural and shipbuilding artifacts, but, I can make it interesting and fun. I can try to. And so, yeah, I just want people to be interested in their town and in the history around them. And, I think that's partly why I'm doing more modern history, 20th century stuff, just because it gets people remembering and excited about, when they were kids. And, that's history for well, or if not now, it will be, so right. I try to get them to appreciate that the landscape we live in is the way it is because of decisions people made hundreds of years ago or 5 years ago, and that they are a part of that historical landscape, and the decisions that we make today are going to shape the landscape of the future. And this isn't like an environmental lecture or anything like that. Just generally speaking, why is that rock there? Why is that wall have that funny brick pattern? I look at things and just wonder why they're like that, and then try to kind of interrogate the landscape, see what it tells me. Yeah. I'm a history detective.
Yeah.
That was my favorite show, man. TBS. I was so mad when they stopped doing it.
Well, if tourists, individuals, people, human beings, animals, whoever want to come visit the Mattapoisett Museum, what are the hours, the days, is it seasonal? Tell us a little bit about it.
It is pretty seasonal, yeah. So, I'm here year round preparing and doing various things, but we are open May through September on Fridays and Saturdays from noon to 4, or by appointment. If you're not coming on a weekend, you can shoot me an email, curator@mattapoisettmuseum.org, and we can arrange something on one of the other days of the week that I'm here and not at the Fishing Heritage Center.
For Backyard Road Trips, I'm Zack.
I'm Jim.
I'm Connor.
And thanks to Connor for joining us on this lovely day.
Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.